folks. Welcome to a podcast about Catholic things. This is Eric, the ambassador of common sense, and I'm here with
Dan. I'm the ambassador of nonsense. Welcome, everyone.
And let's see, today we're going to talk about work and the dignity of work and what it does for man and how it's a way for man to glorify God.
Yep, makes sense. And to clarify, we're not talking about work in the 9-to-5 systematic, industrialized sense of you get up, you go to work, you have a job, and that kind of thing. Although that very much can play into it, what we're really talking about is labor, the fruit of your hands, the fruit of the application of your mind and your physical talents to producing things that didn't exist before, or just maintaining things that do exist. Even if it's maintaining, say, a garden.
Well, I was thinking more along the lines of 9-to-5 work.
Oh, okay.
That's the direction I was going to head in anyway when I was thinking about doing this. And this stems from a talk given by Fulton Sheen about work.
Oh,
and the changing workplace as the world industrialized, and how our work just dramatically changed.
In the sense of becoming disconnected with maybe the product or with its place in our society around us and our neighbors.
In the way
stuff
it was disconnected from man's ability to create.
Ah, okay.
But I think this. I guess it doesn't have to be that, though. It can all.
Well, I think we need to get there because most people have that 9-to-5 job, and a lot of people with that 9-to-5 job feel a disconnect.
Yeah.
I think it's important for them to understand the reality of their ability to glorify God within that 9-to-5 job.
Yeah. And then I guess, and this is where what you were talking about would come into play, because that job is not the only work that you will or should do.
Oh, yeah, certainly. But why does work have any dignity at all for man? And that's why I brought up the thing about gardening, is because the first assignment of work was a command of God within the context of the Garden of Eden. And
this was before the fall.
Absolutely. So man was made, among other things, to work.
Yeah. Before we get into this, we've done, I think, 25 podcasts now. We have never actually introduced ourselves and talked about what we do outside of these podcasts.
No, we've talked about the fact that we're brothers and that we're Catholic.
That's about it.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast is because there's a lot of other podcasts and radio shows out there, and they're done by people whose business it is to be Catholic and comment on Catholic things.
Right.
And I wanted to do one. We don't have any connection that way. We're not employed by the church or by any kind of ministry. We're just two guys living our lives, and we happen to be Catholic, and we want to talk about these things in light of that mindset.
Yeah. So many of the people that you hear on a Catholic radio station or whatever, they were called, and I think that they really are called because many of them are very good.
Right.
But they were called to give up the kind of jobs that we now have in favor of full-time ministry, full-time speaking ministry or media ministry or whatever it is. But we haven't, to our knowledge, been called there yet.
There's kind of a disconnect, I feel like, sometimes, between their Catholic world, or the world they're talking about, and, on the front line, living your life and doing the things you have to do in a normal week.
Right.
So that was the reason, that was one of the things about this podcast that it was supposed to be. And again, 25 podcasts, and I don't think anyone has any idea what we do for a living.
Good point.
And we haven't even talked about our education and things like that.
Yeah. This is among the, we'll call it working class. This podcast is kind of by us, for us kind of thing. You could think of it that way.
Right.
Am I appropriating another cultural concept there? Isn't that some kind of brand?
That is a brand. It's a it's a black thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm all for people who can make brands out of stuff and
Yeah.
to sell stuff. So
So what do you do?
I'm an engineer. And ironically, talking in this podcast about the 9 to 5 work, and often it's disconnect from our sense of the creative and participation in the glory of God. Well,
You don't have that.
I don't have that as an engineer, specifically as a software engineer, even though my day can sometimes be a little bit tedious because I have to review plans. I have to write up things that are kind of rote. I've done it 100 times before and I'm writing the same thing, except I'm just replacing this word with that word, or going through estimates of how long it should take this person to do this and this person to do this and so forth. But when it comes to the work and the product that I'm driving, and much of the work that I personally do, I'm in very much a full creative mode, even if that creativity is figuring out how to construct something more so than creatively designing what to construct. It's still a very creative kind of a job. So yeah,
What about your
unfortunately,
education?
I'm not going to be able to I guess empathize a lot with the people that don't have that education. I went to a all male college and got a degree in electrical engineering. The college isn't all male anymore. The year that I graduated was the year that the board of directors for the college, I think that's the right name for them, voted to allow women in as undergraduates. They already had women walking around campus because they had girls as graduate students doing research and that kind of stuff, but they didn't have any female undergrads. Well, that's not the case anymore. It's Rose Hallman, for anybody who's wondering. And I graduated there in 93. It was supposed to be 92, but I did a little bit of co-op kind of thing that I worked out with the director of the department and graduated a year later and took my electrical engineering degree and went on to become a software engineer and haven't professionally done a single bit of electrical engineering.
You graduated cum laude?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. I have a good job too in terms of creativity and seeing the fruits of my labor right away. I'm a technician. I work on anything from office equipment like copiers and printers to more production equipment like big printers, and sometimes doing installations, having to make all these different machines talk to each other and communicate and stuff like that. I see this is going to come as a little bit of a surprise. The last year that I completed in school was 8th grade. I dropped out in 9th grade. Did a little bit of college, but after I got my GED, but I really didn't do much because I hate school. But that's as far as my education takes me. Anything else I have, I just picked up books and read, or yeah, which is easy nowadays because it's so easy to learn anything
between
you want
YouTube
to learn.
And yeah, absolutely.
Wikipedia and
not that anybody should plan their life on that, because part of the value of the school system is distilling everything that's out there into a sufficient enough survey to get the right breadth and allow the right depth within certain chosen topics. But it's not necessarily for everybody.
Aside from that, not having even a high school diploma makes it very difficult to get a job. And a lot of times you have to take jobs that you normally wouldn't want. And I've done my time on the factory floor and on the warehouse floor. So I do understand that disconnect that we were talking about, and I can empathize with that.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me ask this. When you were on some of those jobs, did you have any ongoing interaction with the people you were working with?
Yeah, usually.
Okay. Was it in some sense a little bit fulfilling, in a sense that allowed you to at least not dread going to work?
Definitely.
Okay.
I mean, if it's not for the people around you and the ability to talk with them and tell stories about that idiot manager or that idiot foreman and things like that, makes the job bearable. Without
Right.
those things, I really can't imagine living that way.
I ask because my first job was a janitor-ish,
Yeah.
and we worked as a crew. It was only a few nights a week, up at the Knights at Columbus Hall, cleaning up
Oh, yeah.
after, bingo and weddings and so on and so forth. But, as a crew, while we were working, we're also talking and that kind of stuff. And I can't imagine doing that long term without people to interact with. It's the people you interact with, I think, that make more the job than the work itself.
Right. Definitely. Okay, so the reason I brought this subject up is there was a time in history whatever you did for a living, there was kind of a fulfillment out of it because
it was something
that
was almost your identity.
It was your identity, and not only
shoes,
that,
you were a cobbler, for example.
It's part of your interaction with God, in that God designed us after himself, and part of that is creativity. He did not give creativity to animals or even the angel. He only gave it to us.
That's right.
And it's
minister.
Part of our design to create and to marvel at it and to be proud of it.
Yep.
And it was from the very start. But even after the fall, that still exists. It's part of our nature.
We didn't lose that. Right. We lost grace, and even some parts of our nature became distorted, but we didn't lose that image of God in which he made us, which includes his act of creation.
It's kind of an amazing thing. And, when we have these sci-fi films where we create these computers which will be like us and try to create themselves with all the AI movies and suddenly rebel against us. And we assume that's what would happen if we created computers that were self-aware, because that's what we did.
That's a good point. I never thought of that in terms of the sci-fi films like The Matrix and The Terminator. Is there a element in there that perhaps completely subconscious to the writers and the creators of these movies, that they're expressing a fear that's based on our own tendency to rebel against our creator?
Yeah, I think about that every now and then as I'm trying to, because I write sci-fi sometimes, and I would think, well, it just occurred to me one day, like 20 years ago, and anytime I write sci-fi, I have that in mind as I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, God gave us this creativity. And for most of history, whenever man worked, it was part of his work.
Right.
Now, there are certain jobs that really, like mining, and it's jobs we would say is more or less slave labor, because it doesn't seem to have that. And a lot of times, prisoners and slaves were the ones who did that kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
In the American experiment, there was an idea that the miners could actually own part of the mine, and I think it was a step in the right direction. It's just things got kind of corrupt there, and there was, again, crony capitalism and usury, and things got bad. But I think as the world industrialized, that act of creation was further and further removed from the daily work that man did. And so where, a guy goes in every day and, say, makes a pair of shoes, that's no longer the case. Instead, he goes to a factory and he presses a button and presses maybe a couple other buttons to make machines make shoes. Or he goes in and turns a screw and screws something into place, and he just keeps doing that along an assembly line every day, all day, which can be grueling.
Yeah, but I mean, think of even, that's kind of like the low paid, but it seems to me that a job that is even more removed from that act of creativity and creation, which maybe, while a little bit higher paid, is less valuable. Think about a office worker whose job is to maybe process insurance claims, and all he does is take one, decide where it falls within the, is it valid or not, stamp it and move it on. Take one,
Yeah, and doing the data entry.
He's not even producing any. His company isn't even producing anything.
Yeah.
Each time he does something, there's not even a product, a physical thing, or a benefit to someone. I mean, benefit, I guess, in the sense of insurance or whatever, but there's not necessarily something that he can connect with ever in the world to say, hey, I did that, or I was part of that, or whatever. The guy that presses the machine on the factory, the button on the machine on the factory floor, at least can point to a product or a row of products somewhere and say, I had something to do with making those.
Right.
As far removed as it is.
Right.
So I think throughout the levels of jobs, it's not just even the very low paying, what we would call unskilled or semi-skilled label. I think throughout the levels of jobs, there's this extreme removal from the association of the work you do every day to a thing that's created or produced, either in terms of a benefit to society or in terms of any actual thing that people directly use and interact with.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things this would bring up is something like ambition and the fact that I think there's an actual duty of men who are, say, supporting a family to seek jobs that would in some way avoid that. Jobs that would more or less reflect a talent that God gave them.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
And I mean, the fact is when you have to work and you have to have an income, and that's part of raising a family is being able to pay for a home and food and stuff like that. And there are certain people who might not ever be able to do anything more than press a button or add figures and enter them into the computer. But, and maybe certain circumstances keep people from being able to move beyond that. But I think there is an obligation to at least look for means of making a living that would somehow glorify God in a way that shows the creative ability that He gave to you.
That makes sense.
I think the question is, and I have this argument a lot with other men growing up. I don't even have a high school diploma. So if I find myself without work, you can imagine where I'd have to look. And so there's, say, a job opening that would be a union job, and it would pay more money than I would make at other entry-level jobs.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And there's an expectation on the people around me to take that job because it's going to pay more than the same job at another company.
Right.
And it's more stable, and it's more likely in 2 years that I'll still have that job. But it's monotonous, and I cannot see myself doing that every day. If I have to, I have to, but I can't see myself doing that every day. So if I can find something that's more fulfilling, that pays less, and is not as stable, I tend to go in that direction.
Gravitate towards it. But still pays enough to see to it that your family's provided for.
Right.
Because that's more like a ground level requirement for parents to their families.
Right. And then there's also things like advancement and things like that you have to actually look at. And, you don't want to be 55 years old still using your body the way you could when you were 20.
Yeah.
Because you get worn out after a while.
So that's a good point. We have an obligation to be somewhat ambitious within the context of the workforce to find ways that the special talents that God gave us can be used effectively in this exchange with society that we call a job to get the right pay to be able to provide for our families and so forth. But it has to be about that use of what God gave us, and not merely about the paycheck, especially not merely about the paycheck just right now. Because like you said, opportunities for advancement and growth into perhaps other jobs that may even better fulfill our special talents might be available in let's say a startup company.
Right.
You join the
Or
startup.
even your own company.
Yeah, or you start your own company up. Okay, there's some risk. It might not make it, and then you might be looking for work again, and may end up having to take that union job at some point, but that might be the best what you can see right now, because you don't have a crystal ball. God doesn't tell everybody the future. He lets us figure it out on our own. And so based on what we know right now, hey, this is where I think I could really use what God gave me to benefit my family and to benefit the world, to benefit my neighbors, society around me, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, I'm glorifying God. I'm giving expression to that creative impulse he put inside of me because he made me in his image.
Right. And again, as you brought up, it's when you do work all day, there's almost an overwhelming desire to, at the end of it all, see something that you've produced, or at least to know that you've fulfilled a need.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't have that, I think there's a general obligation to seek it out, because your work should fulfill you. It's not something you should wake up every morning and think, I don't want to go in.
Yeah, if that's a daily experience, there may be something wrong with the line of work you're in.
Right.
For you. It may be a mismatch for you. That doesn't mean nobody should do it.
And it doesn't even mean you shouldn't be doing it right now.
Yeah. It may be what you have to do.
I had started my own company repairing printers, and in order to make that work, I was going to have to work somewhere else as well. So I worked nights at Amazon, one of their warehouses, and during the day took whatever jobs fixing printers that I could get. But I can tell you that every morning I would dread having to go to Amazon.
Yeah.
Since then, I've quit Amazon because I've been able to. I don't ever wake up and think, oh, I don't want to go to work today. There are jobs that I dread, and it's like, oh, man, this is going to be
okay.
beast.
I got to deal with that customer again.
But I don't ever dread going to work. It's actually a joy to me. And if you can find a job that is an actual pleasure, well, yeah, I guess you've gotten lucky. But I think work is supposed to be that way for men.
Yeah. What about men whose sense of fulfillment in building things comes from the mere fact of building a business itself, and it almost doesn't matter what it is the business does, what it provides to society. They see a market need of some kind. It might be very mundane, and doing the daily grind of it day to day might be tedious and in a direct sense unfulfilling, but the fact that they've built it into a business, maybe have 3 or 4 employees, and it's stable and it's serving a need and it's got its place and it's got enough margin income that they're able to make sure that if the market is changing, they can kind of shift with it. And that's their sense of creativity and accomplishment, that they've built this business. It seems to me that's at least a legitimate fulfillment of that just as much as the work itself.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know there's some in Cincinnati. I'll bet they're all over the place. Jobs to clean up dog doo for people. It's still a job.
I never heard of that.
It's people want that stuff out of their yard, and this company will come in and remove all the traces of it. And I imagine the employees, they didn't grow up thinking, well, I'm going to have to do this. This stinks. But the people who start those businesses are usually, we're not talking about, college graduates here.
Right.
This is a guy who suddenly had the idea, this guy would pay me to clean up dog doo once a week. Why not? And
they might be somebody who started out doing some landscaping, maybe working for another company, and once in a while a customer would say, well, would you mind picking up all the dog poop too?
$50,
and he got an
lady.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you're unhappy in your employment, I I think you owe it to yourself, but also you owe it to your family and society to find a way, if possible, to make your work more fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's somewhat risky. Not all risky, because you can't just quit your job and decide I'm going to go, start a XYZ company and, throw caution to the wind. You got to play it smart. But there's nothing wrong with kind of jumping into something that you don't know if it's going to turn out or not.
Yeah, you take appropriate precautions. You figure out, okay, I think here's how much I know that I can make. I have enough maybe saved up that I can make the excess, or I've talked to my wife and we figured out how, if it comes to an extreme emergency, we can tighten our belts for this long and still not be ready to kill each other at the end of every day.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't pan out within so much time, well, then I need to look for something else and get back to where I'm maybe making money in a more stable way while I think about what else I might be able to do that might be more fulfilling.
Right.
But I think you're right. I think there's so many people who get into that rut of, well, this is the only job I could get, so I'm stuck here. And I think as Christians,
I think that's why people go postal.
Yeah, exactly. As Christians, we owe it to ourselves to be looking for that next thing and saying, okay, if this isn't really fulfilling me, what might? Now, there might be people who, and I don't know every aspect about how this might work in a sense of psychology or whatever. There may be people who are simply not designed maybe for ambition, who, if they can come home and at home they have a good wife and there's dinner and they can enjoy their evenings with their family, they're happy to go into that factory every day and sweep floors or whatever it is they do, as long as what they need at home is there and as long as their job allows them to keep that there.
And it's not like there's no nobility in that.
Right, absolutely. That's the point. There's everything that we do in some way contributes to the overall creation of societies and cultures and nations and civilizations and so forth, even the factory floor sweeper.
Mm-hmm.
And so if somebody's happy doing that, if somebody doesn't feel unfulfilled, if they don't dread going in, if their real happiness comes from their home evening life and the job is just a job and they don't feel like, oh, this really stinks, then that may very well be where they should be. That's I think it's not necessarily a given that every person is called to that ambition to seek some kind of directly creative job.
Right.
And that's the other side of it, is that we have to see that everybody's contribution has nobility to it. It's kind of like the writings of St. Paul, who talked about the church with the multiple parts in the body, and some parts are called to different types of activity than other parts, but all the activities that all the parts are called to are noble and are necessary to the body.
Right.
And so we shouldn't be, nobody should hear us saying that, oh, if you don't have some kind of creative job, you're not fulfilling God's plan for you, or you're not doing it right, or whatever.
Right.
I think the bigger point is that if your job is something that you're just dreading going in every day, maybe you need to think about that in a broader context of, does this really fulfill the talents that God gave me in terms of making them a gift to the society I'm in? Whether that society, whether you think of that as a local society in your hometown and your neighbors, or just broader society, because you might work for a multinational company and you've got 20,000 employees and you're just one among them, and you have some contribution to make. That contribution has some role in the world society, and that might be the kind of job that you should be in. So, or you might be thinking, well, wait, this really isn't what I want. It's not at all what I enjoy doing. I'm always wishing that I was somewhere else. I'm waiting for that end of the clock. Maybe I should start checking out the company's online job website for some kind of lateral move to a different kind of position or something like that.
And of course, there's the fact that after work, you're stepping into another role. And that is a part of your creativity as well. So you go home and you have a relationship with your spouse and or your kids, and you have a yard that you clean up and garden, and you have hobbies and things like that. And the job is what enables you to do these other things. So you can put it in your head that this unlikable part of the day is something that helps you do all the other things that you do.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that either.
Right. Every job is in service of something beyond the job itself.
And I guess that's one of the big differences, because to some people, work is what enables them to do all the other things they want to do. In my own way of looking at life, work is one of the ends, not just a means. I've always looked at work like this is what I'm striving for, this job, not the things that are going to come from this job. And it shouldn't be that way, I guess, too much. I'm just saying that work is one of the ends that we strive for, generally.
Yeah, it's not... It might fall in a hierarchy of ends that are maybe below family or something like that, but for many people, it can be an end. I think for some other people, and it might be even the majority of the population, that it's just the means to an end.
Right.
But whether it's the means to an end or the end in itself, it's important that it have its right place in the hierarchy of priorities. But if you're somebody who's got that sense that you just feel driven to do something that your life doesn't give you any freedom to do, any outlet for maybe creative energy or for some kind of talent that you know you could bring to the world, well, it might be that you can find the right job that allows you for that.
Right. And it's not like God only gave us each one talent.
That's
you might
true.
find yourself a good writer. You're not going to make a living at being a writer. Very few people can do that. So you could do that on the side, and you can probably use other talents you have, like me, say, fixing things. I happen to be very good at it, and I go to work enjoying what I'm going to do, looking forward to figuring out problems I've never seen and things like that. I've had a lot of different jobs. Did I tell you I tried to get a job at Hanes Underwear?
At where?
Hanes Underwear.
Oh, doing
Hanes.
what? As a model?
Yeah. No, I went in. Well, see, the audience, they don't know me, so they can't see that I weigh like 5 pounds. I'm
it seems
really
like you
skinny.
would be the ideal model.
Right. I would have thought. So I went in, and I told him what I wanted, and she said, hold on. She went and got a manager. Manager comes back. I told him, well, I want to be a model for Hanes Underwear. And he handed me a pair of briefs and said, here, fill these out. I didn't get the job.
Did you get the joke?
No. Yeah, I did get the joke. I slunk away. No, I can't do that. I guess there are other things like you have to know what you're capable of doing. And I know that, see, I've never not had my own business going. When I was 10 years old, remember Dad started that worm farm?
Yep.
He took all the... It was a compost pile.
Yep, in the backyard.
Yeah, I was 10 years old.
One at that. He just threw everything in it.
Yeah, he was really bad at it. He'd put meat in there and all kinds of junk. I did not know at the time you can't put meat in a compost pile. That's terrible. Right. But he would pile things back there, and there were a lot of worms in there.
There were
just
worms
red
in it.
worms.
Mm-hmm.
I was 10 at the time, and he also worked on office equipment, so he had these mimeograph machines that you could print things. And so right away, after like I guess 6 months, we had pretty many worms there. So I printed out these flyers that said worms for sale. I put them on everybody's door. We're in the middle of the city. I don't, but I guess people would go fishing. They would want worms, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was my first business. That was even before I could mow lawns.
Oh, no kidding.
Every time I learn how to do something, I start a business.
Make a business of it.
Yeah, I've been that way my whole life.
That's right. That's right. Like the forge.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I remember that. We were, 12?
No, I mean the most recent one.
Oh, yeah. You know what? Yeah, I did get a
Tomahawks.
forge, and I made some tomahawks, and I realized, yeah, I could do this. I could probably sell them. And then I realized that even if I'm doing it for myself, doing this for 8 hours a day or 10 or 12 hours a day, I would not want to do that.
Not the right outlet to your creative
Right.
talents.
I so like after I learned how to do it and got somewhat good at doing it, then I just stopped doing it. And so, but I don't know. There are people who cannot do
Yeah.
the same way I cannot conceive of working for one company for 20 years.
To get that pension, which they don't
Right.
even have the pension. Pensions aren't
Yeah,
even a thing anymore. But
Yeah. But there are some people who could not conceive risking the daily job for something like that. And
hmm
I remember I had started my own business fixing printers, and I had to have a website, and I knew a fair amount about online marketing. So I built the website, and I used these certain techniques to get the website traffic, and it worked really well. And I thought, I wonder if that would work for any other industry. So
hmm
I started another website for repairing washers and dryers,
Oh, huh.
and just to see what would happen. And within a month, I'm getting calls from people who wanted their washer and dryer fixed.
But could you do that?
Well, I could. So I went to a couple places and did it, but you can't charge as much money. So I didn't want to keep doing that.
Oh,
But I knew another guy who did do it,
uh-huh. So
and
just
he
say
was
the
good
website
at it.
to him?
Well, I wanted to. I said, I'll tell you what, I said, I'll get you the calls, you run him, you tell me how much you want, that's how much I'll pay you per call. Or actually, I'll just let you actually run the website and run the business, and you give me, say, 10% of every call that comes out of this website. He didn't want to
Wasn't
do
interested?
it. Right. And he liked working on washers and dryers,
Mm-hmm.
but he had lost his job, and he was stuck at Amazon like I was.
Oh, is that where you met
But
him?
yeah, the idea of doing that on your own and being on your own and not being able to fall back on something like saying, well, I don't know what, when you make a mistake when you're on your own, you have to answer.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're at a company, your boss has to answer for it.
Right.
And so that's a little scary, especially if your job is to fix things.
You end up making it worse, and you end up having to, you broke something
Right.
else, and so now you've got to come up with $350. Yeah,
Fix it or pay for it or something.
right.
But some people cannot do that. And I think that's primarily the reason he didn't want to do that. And so I couldn't even understand why he wouldn't want to do it. And I guess there are people who look at me and aren't
can you
able
do
to
that?
understand why would I go work
Yeah.
on my own instead of having a stable job to pay me every week on time the exact same amount.
Right. Why would you give that up? That's
Right.
How a lot of people would see that.
So I bring that up because there's all kinds of. I'm not dissing those factory jobs or the hard labor or the mundane data entry jobs.
Right.
Um,
Right. Well, the other thing is to realize that there's such a degree of interconnectedness in jobs in the world today. But even without it being in the whole world, just within a community, within a country, or whatever. But I think somebody did I forget what the first one was. One was a pencil and one was a cup of tea or something like that. But they went through the kind of the explanations of all of the aspects of the different things that had to happen, let's say, in order for that pencil to come together. So you've got
Okay.
the trees, the harvesting of the wood, the cutting of the wood, you've got the graphite and the mining of that and the sale of that, and then the manufacture and then the paint for the pencil and where that comes from, and the eraser and all of the different kinds of jobs that seem completely unrelated to each other, and each one is a major industry, and yet they all have to be there just to produce a simple pencil.
Right.
And everybody in that that given industry or operation, from the boss at the top who's making decisions to the guy on a factory who's sweeping the floor, is part of that.
Yeah.
And I think that if somebody, it's one thing to feel that every day you dread going in because you hate your job and you just feel like you've got these talent impulses that are just so unfulfilled that you just kind of feel like you're going to explode, and you just feel oppressed by the job. And that could be an indication that you really need to start looking for a different job. But if you're ever, I think if people are tempted to feel that my job doesn't mean anything, well, that's a perspective thing. I think every job means something.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be paid to do it.
Right, exactly. And so kind of having that global sense of interconnectedness of work and labor and how all of it supports the civilization that we live in is important for people. That's even those who have a fulfilling job, say talent-wise, can have a feeling of, but it doesn't really mean anything if they don't have that sense of interconnectedness to kind of go along with it.
Right. I mean, I don't fix heart monitoring machines, and nobody's going to die if I don't get there in time to fix this machine or that machine. And if I take that attitude, I'm going to do shoddy work. But if I look at the fact that this machine, it takes 2 people to run it, and after it's run, whatever it produces gives a job to, say, 5 more people, and those people are all without work until I get there to fix the machine. You begin to appreciate more why it's important to get there and get it done and do a good job of it. Mm-hmm. And every job has that with it.
Right.
It's another reason you might not appreciate whatever job is you have is because you're not putting your heart into it. And sometimes it is hard to put your heart into something mundane. At the same time, we are required as Christians to do that, to try to do a better job than we were before, and to strive to do better at whatever it is we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. St. Paul says, never tire of doing what is right. He warns against that sense of being dissatisfied with the work you have.
So if I'm at a warehouse and I'm picking, and I'm picking crap that I think this is garbage, people are buying it, and I have to fill this order, and it kind of leaves you feeling empty because I'm basically part of a company peddling garbage. Which is often how I felt while I was at Amazon. These $5 items that should never have been invented, should never have been made because they're going to be used once and then thrown away. Yeah. At the same time, somebody made that thing, and it went into this warehouse, and now there's a bunch of people employed here, people who are able to eat and have homes because of this employer, Amazon. Mm-hmm. And if nothing else, I can say take my numbers up above productivity or above expectation and do a good job of picking, even though it doesn't take a whole lot of talent to pick. It does take work. It does take effort. And if I give it that, at least I've put something into the job.
Right.
And generally, the more you put into jobs, the more you get out of it. So I put as much of myself as I can into the job. And as you said, aside from that, there are relationships in jobs. And they do mean a lot. Mm-hmm. And if you come in with a sour face and you come
People don't want
to... Yeah, nobody wants to work with someone who does nothing but... You have... excuse my language. You have bitch sessions with your coworkers. Mm-hmm. And it's fun to do that. But if that's all you do, then you're just a pessimist and you bring everyone down instead of making those sessions fun and something to laugh at.
Right.
That's my take on that.
Yeah, I think it's a proper one. That's a good one.
I think that's all I got.
Yeah. Well, rounding up, we are meant to work, and different people are called to work in different ways. but one of the fundamental aspects of work is being part of creating things. And being part of can be on the front line of creation, or it can just be serving a role within a broader company context. All of it is noble and dignified. And in terms of personal fulfillment, God gave each one of us certain talents and certain drives to use that talent. And if we find that we really, really dread work, it could be that we haven't found the job that gives the appropriate outlet to those drives that God gave us, so that we're not fully glorifying God in our work. And ultimately, that should be the goal of everything, is glorifying God.
That's a good way to sum everything up.
So how about some current events?
Okay. I'm pretty excited about this. SpaceX sent their unmanned spacecraft Dragon, successfully docked with the International Space Station. This is the first privately owned spacecraft to dock with International Space Station.
That's right.
I think it might be the first unmanned spacecraft. And I think this is the first spacecraft that is built for carrying loads to and from the space station, other than men. Right. But it will hold a lot of cargo, where most spacecraft will not hold a lot of cargo on their return to the Earth.
Yeah. This is very exciting stuff.
I'm not quite with Elon Musk, where I actually think people are going to live on Mars. I don't think people are ever going to live in outer space. But yeah. I do find this stuff exciting.
I don't know. We could end up populating Mars, but
we'd have to find a way to get an atmosphere. It's got no atmosphere.
Yeah, I know. It would have to be in a bubble that held an atmosphere in. I don't think we're ever going to terraform Mars or anything like that.
Right. It
could be a permanent.
I think it's important. I think the space technology is important, because I think it's better for us to find out how to get out of the solar system. Because I personally believe there are inhabitable planets outside of our solar system. But we're at that magic spot with the sun.
Yeah.
And no other planet has that. So, but there could be other planets out there that have it, and we're not going to get there unless we do all this other stuff first.
So do you think that we're gonna I'm kind of gonna move into a sort of eschatological question here. Do you think we're going to be around? And I'm talking about the predicted end of the world by Jesus and stuff like that. Do you think that's far enough off, and that we're going to be around long enough to, as a human race, inhabit multiple solar systems?
I think we will.
I got to think we're
tens of
talking
thousands?
about thousands of years beyond now for that to happen.
See,
maybe more.
If you think about 100 years ago, and the thought of actually getting into outer space.
Yeah, 1919, 1920.
Okay, look at the computer age. I guess when would you say that started? The 70s, maybe?
Well, depends on what you mean by started. I mean,
I guess we would look at
some semblance of computers even back during World War II a little bit, but
right, with the punch cards and
stuff. Really
stuff.
Coming into its own. Starting to think in terms of smaller computers, 70s.
Well, I guess with the invention of the chips, the
integrated circuits.
Yeah. Right. When that started and we realized we could do this, within a very short amount of time, we took the technology and made thousands of uses for it, and made it better and better and better with a very, very short amount of time.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
What's lacking now is any kind of technology that will allow long-distance space travel. Once that's found, it's going to be like a dam that bursts. And I think if we find something new, I think you're looking at 100 years after that of visiting other solar systems.
Yeah. That'll be tough, because to visit other solar systems and have it meaningful to people here on Earth, because when you look at concepts for space travel right now, you've basically got two options. You've got some kind of, cryo-based,
Yeah.
suspended animation sort of approach where you go to sleep and then thousands of years later you wake up in another part of the galaxy.
Which doesn't do good for anyone outside of the ones making the trip.
The people that sent you may be long. No, I mean, not as individuals, not as a generation, but the people who sent you as a race may be long gone by then. I mean, who knows? The Earth might have been destroyed by some weird thing by then. So it's kind of even scary to think of that.
Right.
But the other thing that people think of in terms of is building a spaceship big enough to host a society of people that would continue to, be a community and marry and have children and raise children and go through generations while they're traveling, which itself is kind of scary because, I mean...
I think you're looking at the same problem then. The people who sent you are not in any way going to be able to benefit from sending you, so there's no point in sending anyone.
Well, there's not only that, but I mean, I could see a point like just in terms of seeding humankind in other parts of the galaxy and so on and so forth. All right, I can kind of get that, but it creates this problem where even today, a lot of liberal nut jobs out there talk about overpopulation and that we're at the extent of population that the Earth can support. Well, we aren't anywhere near, but try to put everybody onto a spaceship that we would be capable of building, and that spaceship's going to be small enough that overpopulation would end up being a real problem. And so now you have to enact rules and laws on that spaceship that, from our Catholic point of view, and this is a podcast about Catholic things, would violate the dignity of man. Things like limiting how many children you might have or stuff like that. So
yeah, I never thought of that.
I can see real problems with both models of that we can think right now about space travel. So I think you're right. In order to enable extrasolar system travel for humans, some whole new mechanism has to be discovered.
Right.
Some new set of laws in the universe or something that allows travel at speeds or, displacement in distances that are just vastly different than our modern concepts. But who knows? They may develop. I don't think we even
either that exists
understand.
Or it doesn't. If it does exist, then we'll eventually figure it out.
If
it doesn't exist,
then this is
okay. This is what we have, and we'll be happy with
mankind's home. That's right.
But I think God gave us a desire to search and explore and discover. And there's a whole universe out there for us to discover. Right now we do it from afar.
Telescopes and stuff. Right.
I would think the same way they would look out to sea and discover that and go explore it. I think it's there for us to discover and explore, and it was part of the whole plan.
Yeah, that could very well be.
Or I'm wrong, and
that's
maybe in 1,000 years Jesus will come back and it'll be like, all right, it's over. Let's all go to heaven or hell and whatever. Okay, let's see. Hold on. Oh, okay. So the new Attorney General William Barr. He has announced he will not do what Sessions has done and recuse himself from the investigation. So he had been advised to recuse himself. He said, no, I'm not going to recuse him myself. So I think that's good. Maybe he'll rein it in. But I think we can... I think it's kind of over anyway, the special investigation or special... counsel's investigation. But the fact is, this is all set up so that they can try to impeach Trump, and that's the end they're working towards anyway. So I don't know if it matters.
It's been an abject failure.
We'll see what happens. I think anyone with just an inkling of goodness in them needs to pray for our president and for the people around him, for him to be successful, or at least in the goals that he's told us about and seems to be working.
Right.
Speaking of Trump, the New Yorker is reporting that Fox News owner Murdoch had a story about Trump paying off Stormy Daniels in 2016 and did not release it because he wanted Trump to win.
Okay.
I don't know why that's a story.
Yeah, he's a news
Why
guy.
would the New Yorker report that? I mean,
why,
if
we learned that CNN had information that was damaging to Hillary Clinton in 2016 and they didn't release it, we wouldn't be surprised. It wouldn't be a story. It would be, well, yeah, of course.
Right.
As
a matter of fact, I think
exactly.
most
Why
of
is
us
it a story?
assume that is the case.
Yeah, probably. That's and it's other than pointing to, see how liberal they are. It's not something that we would say that somehow they're incredibly wrongdoing. The wrongdoing isn't it's just a news organization. They pick what they publish.
Right.
They're not under any obligation.
It's not like the church or something.
Right. Exactly. They don't take some kind of oath of office that say, I'm going to print all the news I know about or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's
I think sometimes the weird thing is that I think news organizations think of their profession as more noble than it really is.
Yeah, they like to think of themselves as some kind of... what's interesting is that for a while they were going into that direction of thinking of themselves as these kind of cold, hard... The news is the news wherever the chips fall, and we report the news without bias or prejudice. And it's kind of weird because ever since Trump got elected, and even before that, I would say since the younger Bush had gotten elected, the news has been in an increasingly open state of, hey, we have a social responsibility not just to report the news, but to report the news in a way that's going to make people think and feel the way we think they ought to think and feel.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the news and where, report it wherever the chips fall. It's about trying to affect the correct kind of social change, and that's become what the news is. And so you see this now that Trump's in office, and they've kind of abandoned, as the media as a class of profession has not only abandoned that sense of objectivity.
Yeah.
They've now gotten to where they've abandoned a sense of professionalism and are kind of going weird crazy.
Yeah.
To the point of making up stories and stuff, or taking stories that have reasonably sufficient, taking up stories for which there may be reason to suspect that they were made up, and then reporting them as though they're real stories. There's...
You almost get embarrassed for them.
Exactly. I mean, it's pretty bad when you feel embarrassed for the likes of CNN or the New York Times.
Okay. Do you know about Thunderbolt 3?
Know about who?
Thunderbolt 3.
Thunderbolt Free. No.
Okay, so Intel has this new communication, I guess it's a communication port, kind of like USB. They call it Thunderbolt 3, and...
Thunderbolt 3. I thought you said free.
THREE.
Yeah, got it.
And they are making that open and royalty-free, open source and royalty-free, hoping, I guess, to get it more widely used.
Okay, so it's a hardware interface.
I think this is supposed to more or less compete with USB 4.
Okay. They developed it in collaboration with Apple.
I did not know that.
Oh, there is a Thunderbolt 1 and 2, of course. Use the same connector as the mini display port, which is that odd little, not quite USB thing on the side of some laptop computers that people may have seen.
Yeah, but nobody uses it. But I guess they're hoping for it to move from USB to Thunderbolt.
Okay.
Which, I don't know. I guess most people wouldn't find this interesting, but it's, to me, I look at it and I see the same, like VHS versus Beta, or what was the the other one besides Blu-ray. What was it? I can't remember.
Oh, the DVD standard? No, the
right after DVDs. There
after
was
DVD,
Blu-ray.
H DVD or something like that. High def.
Yeah,
DVD.
it was something like that.
Yeah.
So
the one that didn't make it, that nobody can remember the name of.
Right. So you got to wonder, is it going to be Thunderbolt 3 or USB 4?
Okay. Right.
I like USB 4 because everything is USB.
Is USB 4 backwards compatible with?
I would assume so. Maybe I'm just making too much of an assumption there, but they're
USB
talking about
3
40 gigabytes per second transfer rate. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's not that big of news. It's just kind of interesting.
No, it is
pop up.
interesting. But it's.
Now here's something. We may have found a way to cure HIV.
Cure, not just treat.
Well, there was an HIV positive man, and I think he's from London, and he is now he's HIV negative after a bone marrow transplant from an HIV resistant donor.
Oh, so there are people who are HIV resistant.
Right.
I didn't even know that.
Right. So if we could get like some kind of some stem cells that could be regenerated
and used to generate, that maybe could be used to be injected to generate HIV resistant bone marrow inside the patient.
Right.
Huh. That's
so
cool.
Yeah. Let's see. Speaking of diseases, Alex Trebek has stage 4 cancer.
Yeah.
He's gonna keep filming though as he's taking his stuff.
Is he? Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. Also, the Jesse Smollett, 16 felony accounts against him. So
they did.
They indicted him.
Indict him.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, he needed it.
That's all I got.
You know, that just reminded me. I was thinking about that earlier in a podcast. That is, I don't know how many ago that we did. We talked a little bit about racism, and we made the comment that as a force, racism isn't really a problem in American society. You find it in certain individuals. You find it in a couple of organizations, the most notable being Planned Parenthood, but it's not really one of those systemic problems in our society. I think the Smollett case kind of highlights that, the fact that people need to go out and stage what they want to call hate crimes these days. You know, it's like, well, not enough is happening to let me, give me my platform to speak out against a problem. Let me go create the problem. Well, you only need to do that if the problem isn't there already.
Yeah, I think it's time for our society to understand that it's not a problem, and to react appropriately.
To stop pretending that, yeah, exactly. That's, move on. Let's work together to solve some.
We've got a lot of other problems. Let's solve some of those.
Yeah.
Instead of, but I think it's one of those things where, you talked about last week sentimentalism, and I think that's what it is. I think there are people who do a lot of bad things, but feel like they're somehow, they feel good about themselves because they're not a racist.
Oh, yeah.
And they think about the fact that they're not a racist and marvel at their own morality.
Yeah, it's like, really, that's...
Yeah, like, I don't kick puppies. I'm fine. I'm a good person. I might go have abortions, but I don't kick puppies, so I'm okay. And I think it's part of the I'm okay, you're okay mentality that really keeps racism as an issue, that because it doesn't need to be. There's nobody's racist.
Yeah. That's if I can keep racism out there, then that means I get to be I get to feel good about myself. Not just feel good about myself, but kind of publicly feel good about myself in front of everybody. Hey, I am such a decent guy. I'm very sensitive about racism, and
I have a best friend who's black, and I have black kids or grandkids or whatever. It's just
the non-racist credential or whatever. I think that's a good point. It allows people to have that feel good about themselves and publicly state that they feel good about themselves because they're not racist. Well, so is practically nobody else.
Right.
I just
even really bad guys are not racist often.
It's kind of funny that you bring this up because this kind of plays right into. I just got back from a cruise a few weeks ago, and on the bus ride, here's the thing: on the bus ride back from the cruise itself, we got back into the harbor on the ship, and then taking a bus back to the airport. And the shuttle driver is this black guy, and he starts these shuttle drivers. They always talk while they're driving. The one guy on the way to the ship from the plane, he's pointing out the different things and kind of joking about it and some different stuff like that. And he's kind of funny. We went through a pretty long tunnel in Miami, and he said, "Hey, you know who dug this tunnel? El Chapo." So just joking, stuff like that, and having fun with everybody. Well, this other guy, this black guy, he starts out this, "Hey, I'm looking at my mirror. I only see one race, the human race," and then he starts going on and on about this like sermonizing us about racism and stuff like that. And it's like, what are you doing?
Make everyone uncomfortable here, I guess.
I didn't even give him a tip because, I felt like he's kind of, it's like he felt the need somehow to give us a sermon. And I'm sure that nobody on that bus needed that sermon. And yet he felt like he had a need to give people that sermon. Well, I think it plays in exactly to what you're saying. It's kind of become the thing that if you could stand up and be non-racist loud enough, it allows you to be all kinds of immoral and yet still feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
All right.
That's all I got.
Okay, well, I got some news from the Nation of Nonsense here. One of these, it's kind of funny, it's kind of cute in a way, though. So, down in Florida, a guy locked his keys in his car and locked his baby in with him. This is over Valentine's Day. Okay. And it turned out that there were some inmates nearby who were helping do some repairs on the parking lot. You know how the inmates that are nonviolent, they'll take them out and do work programs and that kind of stuff with them. Yeah. So they were nearby, working on the parking lot. So the police brought them over and had them use their skills that potentially landed them in jail to begin with to help the guy get the car open and get the baby out. Somebody brought a coat hanger. Yep, they brought a coat hanger over and they used it to unlock the car door.
I was afraid to do that once because I thought I was at work and somebody locked her and I'm like, oh, I can get that out. And then I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't know how to get that door open.
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute. How do you know how to do that?
Yeah. So they got the baby out and everything.
They got the baby out. Everything's good. People are, laughing about it and stuff. The inmates, they still had to go back to jail.
They should have commuted their sentence or something.
A little bit, but they got to interrupt their labor a little bit. And
I think I'm going to start linking to these stories from the posts.
Okay. That's a good idea.
On your show from the Nonsenseville.
Mm-hmm,
but
sure.
That reminds me of this. It was so weird because you're talking about inmates and these criminals doing some, act of kindness or whatever. And you go to Cleves, where I used to live.
Yeah.
I guess most of the people there are, I think most of them are on welfare, but or they get some kind of check. And it's just a bunch of, I guess the best way to say it would be white trash. But there was a car wreck in front of my house.
Oh,
and
wow.
All these hillbillies come out, and only half of them had shirts. But we're walking towards the car, and it's actually an SUV, and it flipped over.
Ooh, man.
So we're walking towards this flipped over SUV, and everybody's going to say, I don't know, I guess see what needs to be done and stuff. And one of them says, hey, there's a gas leaking. So, like, all of us realize we shouldn't go near it because it could explode. So everybody starts backing up. And then I guess it just kind of clicked in my head, okay, there's gas leaking. It's an SUV flipped over, which means there's someone still inside.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
that's right.
I kind of had on my, I was saying, but isn't there someone? And then one of these hillbillies said, hey, there's someone inside there then. And, I mean, there's like 20 of them. They all bum rushed to that SUV.
Well, as soon as they knew there was someone inside.
Right.
It's like,
and they all, I mean, these are not the kind of people you would think of as heroic. Put it that way. Mm-hmm. But they did. They all ran to that SUV knowing that there's a gas leak and pulling. There was a guy and his little girl in there. They got them out. And then they got yelled at by the ambulance driver for moving people after a wreck. But I don't know.
There was a gas leak.
Yeah. So it just kind of reminded me of that.
Well, but that's a good point because replace that crowd of hillbillies with, I don't know, Harvard College grads.
Right.
Country club members types,
Right.
Would you get the same response? I don't think you'd get the same
I kind of don't think so. These guys were, they were bare bones heroes in my book, so.
Yep.
Even though the car didn't explode. But
in their mind it could, which was the urgency for getting the people out.
Which is why I was backing up. I did start moving forward, but these guys all beat me to the car, so I didn't have to do anything. I could stay back.
Okay. Well, I've got a millionaire in Thailand who's offering, I guess in some sense it's not all that strange. He's offering about $300,000 for whoever marries his daughter. Now, I say it's not that strange because even here in the West, through different times, there have been traditions of dowries.
Hold on, send me a link to that. Oh, okay. Why does he have to pay? Why does he have to pay that much money?
He's offering.
Oh, he's just offering.
But I think it's a little bit different. But because even in the West here, various times and places of our civilization, we've had traditions of dowries that go along with the bride as she enters into marriage. And you might remember the John Wayne movie, The Quiet Man, that was about the dowry that Maureen O'Hara's character had and so forth.
Yeah.
So anyway, so he's putting up a dowry of about 314.
300,000.
It translates to 314,000 American. It's actually 10 million baht, which is a BAHT. I think I'm saying it right, which must be the currency they have there.
Yeah.
And he's got this 26-year-old daughter. She works for the family business, and he's looking for somebody to marry her and take over the family business. Now, here's the funny part.
She must be really mean or something.
She must be. I don't know, but
she doesn't look all that bad.
She doesn't. No. He asked, okay, well, what are the qualities that he'd like to see in the man that marries his daughter? Okay, and so I'm reading this part, and I'm thinking, okay, he's going to talk about kindness and, maybe some things like that. No, instead it's, I want someone to take care of my business and make it last. I don't want a person with a bachelor's or master's or philosopher's degree. I want a diligent man. I want someone with a hard-working attitude. That's all.
You think I should go for it? I'd have to get divorced first.
You'd have to get divorced first.
Maybe he wouldn't like that. If you can't make a family last.
Well, you'd probably have to move to Taiwan, and once you're on, or Thailand rather, and once you're on board, he would hand over his the rest of his business to you. The daughter,
yeah, I could do that.
Karnsita, she speaks English and Chinese. Karnsita, that almost sounds like a.
You can't even say it.
It's Karnsita.
That's just the American English spelling for it.
Well, I know it's the American spelling, but the thing when you say it the way it looks like it's spelled, it sounds more like a Latino Latino name or a Latina name
Yeah.
than a Chinese. But anyway, says she's excited about her dad's public offer, even though she was confused at first. I was just thinking he's looking for someone to marry his daughter, but he doesn't care anything about marriage qualifications. All he cares about are the qualifications to carry on his business.
She might be really mean, hard to live with.
She
Some
might
women
be.
are like
I don't
that.
know. And she's, maybe she's going to be the real boss of the business, and that's what he's not telling you.
You think about some women that you know, and I would not marry some women for $300,000.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And with the business. I just wouldn't do it.
The business, too, yeah. No, but like she might be mean, and no matter who actually ends up marrying her, it might be really her that runs the business, not him. It could be he just needs a male figurehead for her to be able to take over the business, because, I don't know, maybe women can't run businesses in Thailand or something. I don't know.
Right.
Because if they could, why wouldn't he just hand it over to her,
Right. Why does he? Well, because if she's not going to reproduce, then there's no one to hand it down to.
Or whatever. That's
you
true.
have to keep
That's
going.
true.
You have to keep it alive.
He wants to leave a family
He has
dynasty
a legacy.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so anybody out there who's interested in moving to Thailand and marrying this young girl, she's 26 years old. You can inherit a business and just
$300,000.
Just full disclosure, the business appears to be farming durians, a fruit that are so stinky that some places have banned them.
Wow.
Maybe that's why.
Yeah.
He has to offer the money. Okay, so moving on. The town of Fairhaven, Vermont has a goat for a mayor. Actually, yeah, we know a little bit about goats.
Yeah. Let me see this goat. Hold on.
Yeah, she's a Nubian named Lincoln. Or maybe it's he is a Nubian named Lincoln.
That's not a full-bred Nubian.
No, not full blood. But got some. It kind of looks like a.
I think it's got some Toggenburg in it.
Yeah, the ears aren't floppy enough to be full-blood Nubian.
Right. We live right in the city. We had goats when we were kids. My dad got goats when we were kids. So we raised goats even though we lived in the city.
Right. So Lincoln beat out 15 other animals on the ballot, and
it was like a race between animals?
Yeah, including a dog and a cat and a gerbil.
And the goat won.
How
about that?
That's right.
Did you ever see those fainting goats?
Those what? Fainting goats?
Yeah.
No.
There's a goat that whenever it gets nervous, it faints. If you startle it, it'll just fall over.
It just faints. Okay.
Yeah. Then a couple minutes later, it'll get up and start walking around again.
That must be like some kind of predator defense against predators who will only attack live goats.
I guess so. It seems like not a good. Well, I guess there's possum.
Yeah, possums play dead in order to keep other animals from chasing them.
It actually works.
Some animals won't eat a dead animal. They have to chase it down themselves.
And some animals just want to kill it. But it works. I've seen it work. I went on my back porch and there was a possum there. And I thoroughly hate possums. I think that's the ugliest animal ever created.
Yeah.
So I had a dog and I called the dog over and let her outside. And it took her like 5 minutes to see the thing. Finally, she saw it and let out after it. And it got to like the middle of the yard and just stopped and fell over. And she came over and she sniffed it and then just walked away.
Gave up. Huh.
I think they actually put a scent out that makes them smell dead too. Because I thought I was really mad.
That he didn't just kill it?
Right, because I didn't want to have to kill it myself. But I don't want possums digging through my garbage, so I did end up having to kill it. Made it easy on me because I didn't have to chase it, but it works. So maybe fainting goats.
Fainting goats give out a smell like that too.
What kind of things chase goats and eat them.
Oh, mountain lions.
The Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Tyrannosaurus Rex. No, the lions, certain kinds of lions though, and panthers. I don't know if you've seen it. I mean, they'll take a goat or a goat-sized animal in its mouth and climb up a tree with it.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah, that's like evolution that would have taken place since we've domesticated them.
Oh, mm-hmm.
Well, I guess you don't hear about them in the wild. They're only domestic animals.
Who, goats?
Goats that faint.
Oh, the fainting goats.
There are no wild
weird.
Fainting goats.
That's weird.
There's only domesticated, so it would have happened.
I'd never heard of fainting goats, but that is extra.
Look it up, and you'll find videos of them.
Huh.
Oh well.
Well.
I like those. I'm gonna get goats again.
Well, okay, and maybe one day yours will be mayor. So this goat is a mayor. The town, I guess they elect an animal every year to be mayor. It's an honorary title whose responsibilities include attending local and major events, including the Memorial Day Parade. And the town is actually run by a town manager.
So they don't have an actual mayor.
They have an honorary
they do have a mayor,
which is an animal. Yeah, but all the decisions are made by the town manager.
It's like making fun of politics. Making fun of politicians.
I think, there may be a little bit of a message in there.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, actually.
Yeah,
that's about what I think of.
Elect a goat for mayor.
Mayors.
That's right. Yeah, mayors. I'm sure that they do good work in many cities, but it just seems to me that somehow my impressions of mayors has become associated with petty tyranny.
Yeah. Can't say that I'm. Well, I'm going to shut up. I'm not going to talk about the Cincinnati mayor.
Yeah. Better not. Okay, so that's all I've got.
That's all we got? All right.
Thanks for joining, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. Think about what we said, and we'll see you next week on a podcast about Catholic things. Remember, circle the beads. Yeah.
All right, guys. Bye.